Okay, welcome guys to our next week. Hopefully you have had a wonderful weekend. This should be a fairly short screencast just to kind of take you through some expectations, some ideas, some thoughts, kind of wrap up a couple of things from the discussions you guys have had for the last couple of weeks. First thing I do want to point out, if you go to content and scroll down a little bit, now you should be able to see your copyright case. The presentation information is here. This is where you will load the actual document. And I may have called it Dropbox, I'm not sure, but this is where you will upload the assignment. This one is kind of similar to the last professional topic one in that there are two different parts. Somebody had asked a question about the presentation. The paper is what you submit to me. The presentation that you put together about your project is what you guys will share within your discussion groups. So it does have information for the research paper, and then if you go all the way down, it gives you guidelines for the presentation part. Few things you need to remember about any presentation. If you think about the rule of 6, no more than 6 bullets on a slide. If it's PowerPoint, Google presentation, really does not matter. We're all adults, so make sure that you don't put every single thing that you are going to share within your discussion group into your PowerPoint. You need to be able to explain a little more, but you don't want to overwhelm everyone with a really, really wordy PowerPoint. So those are just a couple of tips, things to think about as you go along. And one thing to make sure that you know, in the information section, if you come down to the copyright cases, you will find your assigned copyright case within this document. And I think I actually have the wrong date listed right now on Blackboard. I'll go back and fix it, but you guys should be able to see your name. Here is the actual case, and this, I will say this is probably maybe a little bit harder assignment. Not really harder, but I think it's harder on some of these to dig up the information that you're really looking for, because within the copyright briefs, they're going to use a lot of lawyer lingo, and so for some of this is where you will have to do a little digging, a little extra digging, but that's why they call it research. You're going to search again, and hopefully you're going to pretty much find what the case was about, who was involved, what kind of punitive damages, if there were any, how the case was decided, and who was the winner, loser, or if there one or wasn't one. Which brings me up to my next topic that I just want to very briefly go over within the discussion board. Over the last couple of weeks, you guys have posted your summaries from chapters 1 and 2 from the copyright book. So there were 5 groups. For some reason there were 6 posts, but all 5 of the summarizers did a great job summarizing what you guys talked about within your discussion groups. Hopefully you guys have started to kind of navigate, figure things out. I did notice everyone kind of stayed within the same time frame. It takes about an hour to truly discuss, and go through the different points that you guys want to talk about, where the connector detector makes their connections. So it really should take about an hour. And it may not. Some weeks it may be a little quicker. Some weeks it may go longer. And you guys did a really good job of coming up with some really good points, and some of you guys still had questions by the time you were finished with your discussions. For this week, tonight is the deadline, so far 3 of the groups have finished, and 3 of the summarizers, so there are still 2 out there. But just kind of very quickly, the recurring themes that I saw, kind of a sum up. The changing role of the school librarians. All of us have probably been through some kind of school library, and you can think about previous, when we talked about well, this wasn't the same class, but in my other class, we talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly of school libraries, what we've seen, what works, what doesn't. That's in my teaching and learning class. And one of the things that I noticed with you guys is that the role of the librarian has changed. In 1988, when Charlie Ruszewski was my high school librarian, I didn't see him, in a sense, as a teacher. He was the keeper of the books. He and Miss Permelia. And if Miss Permelia was not impressed with your behavior in the library, you were immediately, sent back to study hall or wherever you came from. It wasn't about finding books that you liked. It was more about the behavior. And so really, when I started in the library 15 years ago, I started at a high school library, and the things that I always heard about a high school library, it was a research library. Really, kids either read or they didn't by 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So I had a very small fiction section, but the rest of my high school library was reference and nonfiction to help the English teachers, the drama or the speech. I think they did a controversial topic. They had to do kind of a pro-con issue. I had social studies in there. I didn't have many math, but occasionally science came a lot, but it was always for research. It wasn't just to come up and read for pleasure. When I moved into the middle school about 12 years ago, we were doing literacy lab here at Greenbrier, and we were doing accelerated reader. So it was all about finding something you liked, taking the test on it, and earning your AR points. Well, since then, I've seen a shift with the Common Core coming out, and I get to do much more teaching. I am definitely, a teacher librarian in the sense that, when the East Lab last week needed me to talk about digital citizenship and copyright, I was the person they came to and said, we need our students to know what's acceptable, what isn't acceptable, what the copyright laws are. I said, yes, I can do that. So it was my opportunity to make sure that they saw me as a teacher. So I put together the lesson based on what they needed. So the changing role, that's huge. Library assistants, I think that was something else that maybe came up. I can't remember if it was this week or the next week. What is right and wrong as far as how many students you have and whether or not they give you an assistant. Honestly, there are no guidelines. I started at Morrilton with student helpers, but I never had an aide until the last year I was there, and I think they just needed a place to put the lady who worked in the cafeteria in my library a couple of hours a day. And honestly, I don't even remember what she really did, because really I had trained my high schoolers, my sophomores, juniors, and seniors to truly run the circulation, and so I really didn't need an assistant. When I was at Bob Courtway, I did have an assistant 3 days a week. I had 1,200 students. It wasn't enough to have 2 librarians, so they had an assistant for me. Now, throughout the last few years, when Tracy McAllister was in the very same position I was, and she still had about 1,200 students, they took the aide away, the assistant, because they decided none of them needed them. When I started here at Greenbrier, I had about 575 students the first few years because we had 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. I had an assistant, a full-time one, that really knew what she was doing, but I didn't realize that. It took me a while to kind of turn over the reins, and then about 3 years in, they decided I didn't need her, so they took her away. And now I just have, 7th grade student helpers. Are they perfect? No. Can they do a lot of the circulation tasks? Yes. Do they do it perfectly? Nope. And I probably said that because I was not here Friday, and there were several books misshelved. There were a lot of things that weren't checked out, but eventually you have to learn to kind of let it go. So assistants, that's just kind of hit or miss. It just kind of depends. If you can show the need, your administrators see the need, then you get it. But it's just like with anything else. The football program is going to sink or swim based on the views that, that the people with the money have. If your top think that that's the most important program, that's where the money goes. If they think the band program, if they think that, the SPED program, it just kind of depends on where the higher ups see it. There is no consistency, as sad as that is. However, if you do get to 1,500 students, they do have to have 2 full-time librarians. So just know that, it's out there. Copyright was the third biggest issue, and obviously, that one's pretty obvious. The teachers pay teachers. Those are things that, if you have done the work on your own time, then the school does not necessarily own the copyright for it. However, if you are creating that assignment, lesson, those instructional materials during your planning period, during the school day, yes, they own that. And I think that that's something a lot of us didn't know. Another thing that I think that a lot of us do, and I can't remember if that was in our chapter yet, is keeping student work from year to year. If you do not have permission from that student, then technically you cannot keep it from one year to the next. So I know that we all violate copyright, and not even necessarily maliciously or doing it on purpose. A lot of times it is ignorance. And yes, the media specialist should be the go-to person. Not that we have all of the answers, so some of our best things to do is to, above any of the copiers, put a sign that says, copyright violations are the responsibility of whomever makes the copies. You can kind of protect yourself, and if you send the information out to your teachers, then it does cover you when they violate. You can say, this is what, these are the steps that I've done, you just need to document. So let me end this and say, I hope that you guys are enjoying your discussion groups. I hope that it's helping you guys realize that, yes, you are pulling out the right information. Know that whether you've come up with the exact same thing as everyone else did, it gives you guys time to really discuss things. And here is a discussion post. This was something I think that Ms. McAllister and I, this is a quote from us, that we had used in one of our trainings one time, or I think it might have been a workshop with AIM. And so I can't remember who was talking, but it's just know that the role of the librarian has changed. A teacher, librarian, librarian, teacher. If you're doing it right, you must trade in that moo-moo you thought you were going to put on. Get rid of that horse that you were riding into the sunset of retirement. And apparently I didn't even spell that. Realize that you have to put on your track shoes, rev up your sports car, baby, because you are the school librarian. This is where, when you guys get into the school library, if you go back to that passive role where you are the keeper of the books, the copyright part is not going to get done. You're not going to be imparting the information that you need to, and that's what we are here for. We are all about information. So, if having a library assistant is huge on your bucket list, then it's up to you. Well, I don't guess it's a bucket list, but on your list of things that you need to learn how to document everything. So good luck, go forth this week, have a great discussion, and just be ready to share your first projects next week. Enjoy.